Hello and welcome back to briefing number 14 in the series Marketing for Charities, brought to you by the Worshipful Company of Marketors. My name's Peter Rees and it's my pleasure to be your host and narrator once again. In this briefing we're going to cover the last but one topic area in this programme, that of control. I'll start by giving you an overview of the agenda items we're going to cover in today's briefing. I'll start off by talking about measuring success and why the control stage of the SOSTAC model is so important. I'll then go into the main areas of this briefing, which is covering metrics, key performance indicators, which are known as KPIs, and analytics. And I'll explain the difference between those terms later on in this briefing. I'll then talk about the next briefing, which is the last in the series towards the end of this, and then I'll remind you once again how questions can be answered and give you some concluding remarks to wrap up. So let's get started with measuring success. I'll start by explaining the importance of control in the overall SOSTAC plan, and in order to do that I'm going to look at the plan in reverse order. So here is the SOSTAC plan, but presented to you the wrong way round, if you like. Started with control, then actions, tactics, strategy, objectives. Now for the purposes of this model I've set situation analysis to one side and just concentrating on the latter 5 steps of the SOSTAC model. So as you can see here, they're all interlinked, but in this case I'm looking at them from, if you like, reverse order. So control is all about how we measure and ensure safe arrival and make sure that the actions which we undertake in the project stage of action, when we're implementing the tactics which we've decided upon and the marketing mix we're going to use in the tactics section, will help us fulfill the strategy that we've put in place in strategy and then achieve the objectives that we put together and set in the early stage. So control is all about measuring all of the previous steps in the SOSTAC model to make sure ultimately that through actions and the implementation of tactics and the support of strategy, the objectives which we've set are delivered. Now the question, of course, that this raises is, well, what do we do if as we go through our planning year, as we go through our financial year, it looks like we're not going to achieve the objectives? I'll talk about this a little bit more on the next slide, but for now just let me say, if it looks like you're not going to achieve your objectives as you go through your year using the control and the metrics you put in place, what do you need to do? What corrective actions can you take? Well, in fact, in most cases, it just refers back to tactics. And if you're not going to achieve your objectives, you have the opportunity to improve the situation and get back on track by adapting the tactics. So if you're a commercial organisation, you could change the definition of the product, you could change the price, you could change the promotion or the communications elements, you could change the processes by which the product or service or offer is delivered to the market, or you could change the service that's wrapped around it. So looking at the different elements of the marketing mix, the 7 Ps relevant to charity operations, think about how you might change or adapt or modify these going through your year if the metrics in the control section indicates you're not going to achieve your year-end objectives. And on the next slide I'm going to give you a worked example which explains this in a little bit more detail. If you look at this model, it shows as an example one particular objective which we might have put in place. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we're looking here at donor income month by month throughout our marketing year. What we'll have done is set an objective, and in fact a plan for the year, which is shown by this red line. And where it starts is probably the going rate of monthly revenue from the previous year. So this shows what we hope to get each month throughout the year. Now the only thing you know for certain when you look at this is you're never going to be exactly on that straight line. Sometimes you'll be ahead of the plan, sometimes you'll be after. And what will actually happen during the year might be something like this. The blue line here shows the actual revenue or income achieved every quarter. So if we look at the end of the first quarter, which is the first blue line here, you can see that we're significantly behind plan. Things improved in the second quarter, we became ahead of plan. The third quarter, we're behind it again. And what we're hoping to do is by the end of the year, get to a situation where we have achieved either the value on the red line or exceeded it, as we've shown here. And if you achieve your target on the red line, or in fact exceed it, you're in the area of success and you have achieved your objective. Now I show this to you just for one particular reason. When I'm explaining this to concepts in charities, in the past I've had people explain to me that if it looks like they're not going to achieve their objective, they would just reduce their target number. Well, this is not a commercially practical way to run the business, and my strong recommendation is if you are behind the plan, fix the problem, don't lower the target, don't reduce your objective. So at the end of the year, you've either failed your objective, you've achieved it, or you've exceeded it. What you should really not do for all practical purposes is reduce the objective itself. And I just commend that approach to you if you want to implement this sort of system in your own organisation. So having set the scene, let's move into the detail of this briefing, which is all about mastering metrics, key performance indicators, and analytics. I'll start with this quote from American business leader, guru, and academic, a gentleman called Tom Peters, who said, "What gets measured gets done." And if you think about that, that's a sensible approach. If you and the members of your organisation know that a particular activity is receiving management attention, it's being measured and reported on regularly, then it's likely to attract their attention because they know that they're being measured and assessed on their contribution to delivering that objective. So what gets measured gets done. So when you are setting objectives, communicate them to others in your organisation so that everybody knows where you're going in your marketing journey and understands their contribution to the overall success of achieving your objectives. Now I'm going to show you some information on this and the following two slides about key performance indicators, or KPIs. Now don't get overwhelmed and don't panic when you see this. What I'm going to list here is all of the possible KPIs that one could think of to measure the success of objectives and the success of business performance in a commercial organisation. So I'm not in any way suggesting that your charity or your organisation should use all of these KPIs. I'm just showing you the totalities of the KPIs that could possibly exist. And on this slide you'll see they're grouped into several areas. So there's a group here of KPIs that might be appropriate for financial control. There's a group of KPIs which might be to do with your engagement with customers. And there's a third group here on this slide about KPIs to do with marketing and sales. So as I said, this can look a bit overwhelming the first time you see it. What you need to do is go through these and pick out the key performance indicators that might be relevant to your particular charity and your particular objectives for a given year. So just pick out the ones that are appropriate, whether it's in finance, customers, or in marketing and sales. The next slide shows another batch of KPIs in the areas operational processes and supply chain, which may not be relevant to most charities, which tend to have a more service-focused orientation. But there are some KPIs here to do with employees, some of which might be relevant to the way in which you interact with and manage your staff, whether it's full-time staff, volunteers, or other supporters of your organisation. The final slide here shows some KPIs in the area which I've called corporate social responsibility. And this is things to do with the way that organisations interact with the environment. It's their contribution to their carbon footprint, to sustainability, to global warming, to recycling, and to ethical sourcing of raw materials. Now, some of these may be relevant to your organisation, to your charity, as a general commercial business and operation, but some of these might be areas in which you wish to communicate your particular charity's objectives or goals in encouraging others to achieve these sorts of areas in their own organisation. So if you're a charity that's concerned with the environment and environmental health and global warming and sustainability and ethical sourcing and recycling and so on, then you might want to think about some of these areas not only as objectives and KPIs for your own organisation, but as areas you can talk about in your communications to your target stakeholders. So I've shown you on these last three slides a whole host of KPIs, and in fact I'll be honest with you, I didn't make these all up myself. I got them from this rather excellent book called Key Performance Indicators, the 79 measures every manager needs to know. Now, if you're interested in KPIs as a topic, or if you want to go deeper into it, I highly recommend this book. It's published by Pearson, and it's a Financial Times management guide to key performance indicators. So if this is something that interests you, I recommend you buy this book and look into it. It's available from Amazon and most other online bookstores. Hello and welcome back to briefing number 14 in the series Marketing for Charities, brought to you by the Worshipful Company of Marketors. My name's Peter Rees and it's my pleasure to be your host and narrator once again. In this briefing we're going to cover the last but one topic area in this programme, that of control. I'll now take things a stage further and show you how this concept of metrics relates to the RISA model and the different stages within it. So if you remember, RISA is a model we discussed previously on an earlier briefing, and the stages of RISA are reach, interact, connect, engage and retain. And you may remember that for each of those stages we developed this worksheet which has the title on the left and then 3 columns: objectives, tactics and metrics. And up until now we've filled in the objectives column, we've filled in the tactics column, and now in this briefing I'm going to give you some examples of the metrics you can use for each of the stages of RISA. And at the end of it I'm going to encourage you to fill in your RISA worksheets with this 3rd column, the metrics. Now if you remember from RISA, the focus of this first stage of reach is all about advertising. It's making people aware and possibly interested in your organisation and its activities. So what we need to do in the metrics is measure the activities and the success of things like a communications campaign, an advertising campaign, and measuring the call to action, the success of what you're asking people to do during your campaign. And it might be things we can see here. It might be increasing the number of visitors to your website. It might be encouraging them to come back again. Most likely in this first stage, you're trying to capture their email address so you can build subsequent communications campaigns with them later on. You might also be encouraging them to download or request information or sign up for a newsletter. And these are typical metrics that you could put in place to measure the effectiveness of the tactics in the middle column to deliver the objectives that you can see here on the left. So the objectives, tactics and metrics column are just examples, and as I've explained before, you need to fill these out for your own organisation. We've done objectives and tactics, now it's time for you to think about what you would measure relevant to the other 2 columns. I hope you remember the second step of the RISA model was the stage called Interact, and here the focus is on content marketing or starting a dialogue and a conversation with your visitors and your users. So here you measure things like the number of downloads, sign-ups, registrations and requests for information. You're measuring the interaction of your target audience with the content that you're delivering through your website or through other channels. So again, we can measure things like sign-ups or the number of downloads of white papers or reports or case studies. We're looking at the number of offers of help you might have generated from your target stakeholders or requests for assistance, information and advice from perhaps your beneficiaries or donors or sponsors or volunteers. So you're measuring the quality and the depth and the efficiency of your communication with whichever target audience you're interacting with in this stage of the RISA model. The third step of the RISA model is C for Connect, and here, if you're a commercial organisation, you typically be measuring a sale or a sales transaction. In charities, I understand, of course, it's slightly different. So here we're looking at things like some sort of positive action which you persuaded your target stakeholder to take. It might be a completed donor form, it might be the amount of funds you've collected via a financial services provider, such as we discussed in a previous briefing. It might be the number of bookings to come to an event, to an introduction, or if it's a beneficiary, it might be bookings you've generated from your beneficiaries to come to receive the service or the discussion or the support that you will provide. So the Connect stage is all about persuading stakeholders to take action, and what you're doing is measuring completed positive actions, whether it's the number of donor forms, signing up for standing orders, volunteer sign-ups or sponsorship agreements from commercial organisation. You're basically measuring the interaction and the positive action taken by your target stakeholders, businesses, individuals or in fact beneficiaries. The last step of RISA, if you remember, was called Engage and Retain. And here we're trying to build long-term relationships and interaction with stakeholders. So repeated value-add interactions. And here, as you can see, the metrics we might put in place is people's response or participation in a loyalty program, repeated donations, renewed subscriptions, the amount of people who are giving you money through bequests or through their will, or community fundraising activities. So you're measuring stakeholder satisfaction, for example, membership loyalty, and the benefits program. You could also look in this stage about something like the donor get donor program and the results of how many people who are your donors are signing up others, or stakeholders are signing up other stakeholders, trustees other trustees, or volunteers are recruiting other volunteers on your behalf. So all of these are areas that you might have set in objectives and deliver through the tactics shown in the centre here and measured as an example with some of the metrics on the right. So having completed that discussion, I would suggest the following action if you and your colleagues, as you're preparing your marketing plan, now that you've discussed the metrics, revisit the 4 worksheets that I've just shown you from previous briefings for each of the steps of the RISA model and fill in the final column, the metrics column. So by then you would have had 4 worksheets, one for each beneficiary group, one set for each beneficiary group with a set of objectives, tactics, and now you can fill in the metrics, and that should be your worksheets completed. With a focus on digital marketing that most charities are undertaking at the moment, I'll just spend a couple of slides talking about the most important digital metrics that one could think about. The first ones are to do with visitors to your website, and these are often misunderstood. So let me take you through the 4 different metrics that one might be interested in. The first one is something called unique monthly visitors, and as the name suggests, this is the number of different people who visit your website during a month. So let's say you have 3 people visiting your website in the month. The first person visits 10 times, the second person visits 20, and the third person visits 30 times. So although there might be 60 visits, that's only 3 unique visitors. So unique monthly visitors is the number of different people who visit your website, irregardless of how often each one comes to visit you. The second one following on from that is the number of visits. So in this example, there was 1 visitor who came 10 times, 1 visitor who came 20, and 1 visitor who came 30. The visits from those 3 unique monthly visitors is 60, 10 plus 20 plus 30. So visits are the total number of times a site is visited, whether the visitors are unique or not. The third important metric is the number of page impressions, which is the number of different pages on your website that visitors experience or go through typically during the month. So it's the number of different web pages that are served in a given period to all the visitors to your website. And then finally, a related one is the number of clicks. It's the number of times, literally the number of times that visitors to your website click on a mouse to typically go through to another page or to open up a window or to take some action. Now, generally speaking, an increase in unique monthly visitors is good. Visits is also good, but increasing page impressions or increasing clicks may or may not be a good thing. And the reason for that is as follows. If you have a website that's very easy to navigate, easy to find information, people are enjoying it, they get involved in it, they're interacting with it, and therefore they will look at a large number of different pages and they'll click their mouse very many times as they go through the site. And in that situation, an increasing number of page impressions, an increasing number of clicks is good. The alternative is, of course, that people are finding it difficult to navigate your website. They can't find the information that they want and they're going through page after page after page, clicking their mouse, but they're not actually finding the information that they need. So be careful if your page impressions and your clicks is at a high level. Make sure it's because people are enjoying the experience, not because they're getting frustrated and failing to find the information that they're looking for. I'll complete this section by looking at metrics to do with 2 of the most popular communications tools which we discussed in the previous lesson on tactics, and that is social media and email marketing metrics. So let's look at social media first. Social media, as you remember, comes in 2 flavours. There's the free social media, where you put information on your own page or your own group and post regular information, and there's paid social media activity, where essentially you're using social media as an advertising channel. And here listed here are the sorts of metrics you can put in place for social media in combination of paid and owned. There's the total number of views that your your social media page encounters. There's the number of likes, follows, retweets, shares, and comments that you receive. There's the number of connections, the people who come on and sign in and belong to your group or your page, and then those who share it to others. There's a number of people who mention your website with a hashtag. There's the user activity in terms of visits and views, and there's the conversions, the click-through rate on your social media advertising. And you can nowadays evaluate the sentiment of the comments that people are talking about. You can find out whether they're saying positive, negative or neutral things about you. Now you can do this by hand, simply by looking through the comments and assessing whether they're saying nice, nasty or neutral things about you, but there are now software tools available to do that automatically. And if that's something that interests you, or you're very heavily involved in social media interactions, then you should look at sentiment analysis using third-party software. The final section here then is email marketing, which is one of the most popular communications tools in the world of digital marketing. And there are a number of very common and important metrics that one can easily assess. The first one is bounce rate. And when you're sending out an email campaign to a number of emails from a database, the bounce rate is the number of emails that are invalid, don't exist anymore, or reject your communication. The second one is the open rate. It's the percentage of people who, having received your email, actually open it to see what's inside. Then, if inside your email, generally speaking, as we discussed, is almost always a link to somewhere on your website or one of your other digital platforms, and you can click the percentage of people, having opened your email, who actually click through and look at the place you direct them to. And then finally, once they've got to the landing page, typically, that you've sent them to, you can see how many of those people click on that landing page and take advantage of the offer or the deal or the coupon that you're presenting there. And then finally, you can look at the number of people who unsubscribe from your mailing list, either by unsubscribing or in fact reporting you as spam and blocking you. So those are the key metrics in email. And those two sections, social media and email, show why one of the reasons digital marketing is so important and so popular these days is because you can get a huge amount of information through these metrics to help you assess the efficiency and the cost effectiveness of these different channels. Let me draw together then the three sections that we've been talking about here: metrics and key performance indicators, which we've already talked about, and analytics, which I'll cover here. So the difference between these three ideas is as follows. Metrics really describe what it is you want to measure. For example, website visitors, donor income, or beneficiary engagements or appointments booked. The key performance indicators are where you go to get this information, and I've given you 75 different examples of the places you can look to get the information to deliver these metrics to you. And it's things like your website management system or your financial services system if you're using a website server like, for example, Just Giving. They will provide lots of information about, in this case, donation collection, or it could be your customer relationship management database, which we've discussed earlier. So those are metrics, is what we want to measure. KPIs are where we go to get the information, and the final one, analytics, are the tools and techniques we can use to extract the information from those sources. And it's areas such as Google Analytics, which is a free tool from Google, which you can install on your website and measure traffic and people's journey through your web pages, also where they come from and their characteristics, using the metadata that I described in the previous briefing. You can look on the Just Giving system for information about donations that they're collecting for you, as I said previously, and your customer relationship management reporting tools give you all sorts of information about repeat visits, repeat interactions, repeat connections to your organization. So those are just some examples of the analytical tools and techniques that you could use. There's clearly a load more that you can get if you're using paid advertising on social media channels or search engine marketing and search engine optimization. There are tools there that helped you look at the efficiency of paid advertising on channels such as Google and the efficiency of your search engine optimization activities. So that summarizes everything we've talked about in this briefing: the metrics, the key performance indicators, and a little bit about analytics. Well, that takes us to the next step, because in fact we've now completed the main content of this briefing program. So the next step is just a summary and a conclusion of the program as a whole. So as we've now finished the program, the briefing, all of the main content, the final briefing, the next and final briefing, will just cover a summary of the things that we've discussed, a reminder and a review of the areas and how you might use them, and some advice on how you can implement these ideas in a practical way and apply them to your own organisation. Because I'm conscious that we've covered a huge amount of information in these briefings, and if you weren't familiar with it, I'm sure there's a lot of it for you to get your head around, and it might be quite difficult to see how you can actually apply all these ideas in practice. And that's something I'm going to address in the next briefing and give you some practical options for taking these ideas forward and applying them in your own organisation. If you do have any questions or comments or feedback, I'd love to hear from you, and to remind you, here are my contact details. They are peter.rees@gmail.com, so please get in touch if you do have any questions or is there anything I can help you with, and I'll do my best to answer them as soon as I can. I'll conclude as usual with a final quotation, as I usually do. This one is from Nelson Mandela, who said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And it's really my hope that what we've learned and what we've discussed during this briefing series will allow you and your charities to go out and continue to make the very positive contribution for which you're so well known and for which so many people are thankful. So thank you very much as always for your time and attention during this briefing. I hope you found it of use and value, and I look forward to seeing you the next time for the very final briefing in this series. So thank you, good luck and good marketing.